Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on January 31st, 2020, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat as we continue our discussion over the lore book Constellations. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the advanced session of the week's exploration. Congratulations to those who have signed up for a deeper dive. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is the exploring, luring, and sometimes warring green-eyed music lover.
And last but definitely not least, in the hot seat as guest co-host, we have our good friend Ted Robinson. Ted, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I know everyone is looking forward to diving into the discussion, and for us, it's literally been about a matter of a couple minutes, so let's get right into it. Green, do you want us to jump through the entries and do a bit of more deeper dive into those entries before we get into because the community actually had some good responses this week.
Right. I think, I don't know if I want to do the community. It's really six of one, half dozen of the other, because there are responses or questions from the community that tie into the card specifically. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can use the questions that we got from the community as a way to start the conversation.
That sounds like a good plan.
So I gathered a bunch of questions from the community on Twitter and just kind of gathered them in here. And I think one of the biggest things from D1 is a lot of people had questions about the speaker. Who is the speaker? What's going on? What is this person? Why are they important, right? So since then, we have had this death of the speaker, and I wanted to get the community's thoughts, who may not be diving into the books as hard as we are, on questions that they have about the speaker. So the first one comes from friend of the show and former guest host, Wicked. He asked, does the Traveler use speakers, in quotations, with every species it encounters? The lore entry from Bastion with the Fallen dialogue mentions a truth speaker, and the Fallen even approach one of the speakers / kidnap him, which I'm adding that in there, for asking for his guidance. So what do we think? There's a card that we get specifically that kind of addresses this a little bit, or at least kind of hints at it. We get the, what is it, longing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, so do we think that there were speakers in the Elixni race, or something similar to speakers in the Elixni race?
I think it's very safe to assume that.
That would make sense. I mean, yeah. Because speakers existed in the Golden Age, so it's not like Guardians, which never existed before, right? And it makes sense that the Traveler would have to communicate. I mean, that actually answers a lot of questions I have around the Golden Age, because it's like, how is this? It's like always said, oh, the Traveler imparted its wisdom. I'm like, cool. How? Like,
right.
It's like, did it have like a glowing little sign on it that was like, now go right, now go left?
Yeah.
Well, probably not so blunt, and even in the descriptions and whatnot, it's going to
I'm
still
simple.
Not be a super...
I need really simple directions.
Tom Traveler.
As well as food.
Just
have food
yep.
and coffee, and Blue is happy.
Yep.
But like the line from Longing itself, that kind of hints that there may be something like that. Now, granted, this is a lost in translation slight thing happening. And this is the Dreg speaking. It says, "You," he says in a crackly, distorted voice, "I am," and speakers floored. They've managed to make a translator. you are the mouth of the great machine. So the fact that they have identified what
Right.
the speaker is and who the speaker is interesting.
Yeah, they would have to know something in order to pinpoint or come to that decision. I would
Either
think.
they have some really good intelligence, which is possible, have figured out what's been going on our end,
Yeah.
or they have experience with it themselves. Those are like the two options that you basically get for that. So it's very possible that it may not be speakers as we see them,
Right.
but there may be those within the Elixir race who have dreamt or have heard the Traveler in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so question number 2, and this one I'm going to let you, Ted, and Blue go at it, because this one I think you guys are going to have a lot more fun with. So, this question comes from Chatting Myth, a friend of the show, and somebody who's going to be on in the month of February. Spoiler alert. He asked, what is the mask of the speaker? That is one of those mystery boxes introduced in D1 Ghost Fragments that still hasn't really been answered, unless through Constellations. It actually feels like the mask is the crisis of the Traveler talking either to or through the speaker. When you read Constellation, in this 2 vertical lines prose that is daggered, which is the 2 vertical lines on either side, is presumably the Traveler's words or thoughts. So it must be using the speaker to a degree as an avatar. Thoughts? Comments?
I think of the mask more as like a lightning rod. Something that the speaker was, after not hearing the Traveler for so long, was finally able to come up with this device, which was the mask, and that's how they tuned in to the sounds that the Traveler was making. And I think with the collapse, it was kind of a two-way street. I don't think the Traveler knew how to talk to us post-collapse, and we didn't know how to talk to it or how to hear it until that speaker started tinkering with a mask. I don't think that the mask that our speaker has is the one that was first made, because they talk about it being made of scrap metal and stuff. I feel like it's very much...
It wasn't refined or anything.
Right. I feel like it's very much a lightsaber-esque type of thing. Like, it was passed down how you make one, and it could be customized and refined to the speaker who was up and coming from that point. But I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens now that the Traveler is awake, if we can hear more of what's going on, if that signal has now been boosted and we don't need a mask, or if at some point we're going to have to find out how to dial back in and figure out what the Traveler's really trying to tell us.
Here's part of my kind of follow-up question to what Chatting Myth posted is, we know that, as you mentioned, the speakers had trouble hearing the Traveler, or having the dreams, or hearing the dreams after the collapse, right? Like, it got down to 0. What is the major difference between the start of the collapse and prior, in the Golden Age, when the Traveler was speaking more freely, and after the collapse? Is it the fact of the Traveler shedding its ghost? Is it the explosion out of the bottom of it, essentially? Is there a reason for that in particular? And why does creating an amplifier... Is it just means our Traveler's technically weaker at this point? So many questions.
Oh, back then, I wouldn't say at the current point, I don't think the Traveler's weaker. But definitely back then. But I keep coming back to that fourth tenet of the Traveler will leave us. And once it was not able to do that, I don't think that the traveler knew how to proceed, and thus spent a lot of its energy on sending out the ghosts.
So I have a counter question for that too. In the final card, we get descriptions of the traveler trying, like, wanting to leave but can't, right? That is something that it's mentioned. Beforehand, with the description of the collapse, doesn't seem to be that same kind of terrifying feeling as if the traveler was blindsided by whatever happened in the collapse. You have the entry where it talks about the old, what is it? I'm trying to remember what it's called. First is suffocation, then pain. The pain isn't localized to any part of you.
That's
but
severing.
to all of you. Yeah, it's when...
That's during the collapse. So, like, that's the one that says, "I am the
Right.
speaker who witnesses the end of the world," which is the best
Right.
opening line. I love that.
Right.
Um,
But then you, like, in here, you have the empty, empty, empty. You don't have the...
that ties
You don't
into
have the traveler...
That ties into the Traveler 3 Ghost Fragment,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, and then you get the running at the end
Yes.
of this one, where the traveler is trying to run and leave, but it can't. Like, what? We still have no... It didn't foresee this, it seems. Like,
Right.
it kind of did, but it didn't run then when it could.
Right.
Well,
So
and,
it got surprised, is what it comes across as.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it saw the Red War coming from a mile away, but whatever happened in the collapse shocked it.
Right. Wasn't
well,
ready for it.
I would argue that it wasn't. It got surprised not by the arrival of the whatever darkness, pyramid ships, whatever you want to call it. That's not what surprised it. It was the outside forces that all of a sudden whoop, grabbed it.
Right.
That had never happened, because it says you want to run, but you are pulled in all directions by opposite and equal forces that hold you perfectly still.
Right.
And
there's
then
another...
Oh, go for it.
There's another mention of the pool, that kind of pool, and I think that's actually in the very, very first card, where it talks about being pulled by 9. Where is it?
No, it's not in the first card.
Is it the second one?
So severing is when they mention the opposite and equal forces. Waiting or waking is the first time that we don't get anything. And then I'm trying to see. So building is when it starts talking again. Growing's the new star. I'm trying to find it real quick, but yes, I know what you're saying. Suffering is when it's talking about the grasping tendrils of dark, which is there. It's one of the subtexts in the cards.
Mm-hmm. But it talks about being pulled in 9 different directions, or 9 directions, which is, I mean, of course, you get the obvious.
Well, there's a lot of things
the 9,
that
but there's a
nod to
lot
the
of
9.
other things. But the fact that it's being pulled in directions,
but see, again, we have the opposing groups of the 9.
Right, but there's also the, of course, Pluto's not being included, but the planets themselves, because the traveler was hopping from traveler was hopping from planet to planet, doing the terraforming thing and creating life. And the fact that it got stuck is weird.
Well, and see, the thing, so the reason I know what you're saying, but I disagree, because we have an instant of it running through the system before it gets paralyzed over Earth.
Right.
Because
I mean, it fled from Mercury. Was it fleeing from Mercury? It fled from one of the planets before it finished.
Io.
Yeah.
That's right.
But and actually, now that I'm thinking about this, so hang on. So with Kraken Mare, we know that right before the Syzygy struck, it was running already. I'm trying to remember the time frame of when the syzygy was supposedly happening, and then where the Traveler was also, because if it was fleeing at the time of Krakenmare, it was fleeing because that was the sundown distress call. And then the earthquake happened, which is attributed to the syzygy or whatever, however you pronounce it. So if it was already in motion there, then I guess technically you could argue, yeah, you're right. You could technically argue that it was the alignment that could have gravitational impulses, like the spheres aligning and doing that.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna hate me. What if it was the 9 different factions, the 9 different groupings, that caused it to freeze?
9 different groupings of what?
Do you remember the 9 card back from D1?
Oh, like the gather information card?
Mm-hmm. The fact that it has essentially 9 different groups, 9 different factions. The Traveler's attracted to planets for Lord only knows what reasons, but...
The Legends card.
Legends too. I don't know. That's just me spin-foiling a little bit. But I think we should move on to the next question. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more going on. Captain Peanut says, do we actually know if any race has spoken or heard the Traveler? And it's not just the words of a being taking charge, is what the question kind of boiled down to. He had a lengthy description at the beginning, but it was the idea of, is there any other races or any race in particular that has had speakers, or is it just someone being a charlatan? And I think this one's kind of an easier one to answer compared to the last two. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's kind of answered in that first card that, there are multiple, there can be multiple speakers, and they all see these visions. I think that's about as spoken to as anybody's ever gotten. It's not been like, hey, what's up, man? Like, I need you to come do this. But
right.
I think it's really safe to assume that it's done that before it's gotten to us. That there have been more people with headaches and dreams and been able to see something attributed to the Traveler.
The fun thing with this one, I can also say, though, is there's no reason to believe that these are any sort of fabrications of raving madmen who have decided to all come up with the same kind of idea and theory about what's going on with the Traveler. The sheer amount of multiple speakers kind of lends to the credibility of them in some respects. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Blue? I know you had a slight hesitation on saying that.
On saying what?
On answering the question in the affirmative.
For Taylor Bees? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Well, so this one, we basically get confirmation here in Constellations that our speaker is the speaker that arrived by Aphrodite's hand. So, in that being the case, I think the answer is that the speaker is really old. Because we get it called out that the speaker is not arisen. We get it called out that the speaker was... I mean, if you follow the entries of Constellations, it is the story of the heritage of the speaker lineage, and then also the story of our speaker. We also know... I know that it's a point of contention because everyone's like, well, how do they know they live that long? Because we've seen in multiple instances how it's referred to that humans had a triple lifespan in the Golden Age, and I know that again, I understand that, everyone's like, well, they don't live that long anymore. I'm like, well, yeah, you're in a dystopian environment. Like, you're not going to live that long if you're living in the middle of a war zone either, because there's things that are going to kill you. But that doesn't mean that you're going to die of old age. It means you're going to die of getting shot in the face. Like,
Right.
There's a difference there. So I think if you put humanity back into a safe environment, that the length of life, I don't know if that's changed necessarity.
Well, that's the question to ask, isn't it? Like
That no, it
Amanda
is.
Holiday
It is
might
the
be
question.
a good thing, or Eva Levante, like
But I mean-
information about them. In
But
particular,
again,
how
with
long they've been
Eva
around.
Levante, with Amanda Holiday, with all these characters, the thing is like I don't see their lifespan as being reverted, because why would it? Light was released, and if anything, more light was released than less. Light
Right.
wasn't
Right.
removed; it was actually increased by the wounding of the traveler, because that's the entire point of the Risen. Is
Also, question: how long has the Vanguard been around in the consensus?
the consensus was brought into formation at the time of the faction wars.
When were how long ago were the faction wars? Do we know?
Dino's again. I agree with Dino. It's about 300-ish years,
So,
which
it's
actually
here
is a
Hideo
testament to
has been there.
which is a testament
over
to
300
just
years.
Right.
how flipping fast the hunters go through Vanguard mentors.
Right, but the
Well, all of them have been.
right, but Hideo has been there since then. Obviously, not necessarily
Jalal.
Lakshmi, because they came in later.
Lakshmi was brought in,
but Jal-
yeah. But
But-
and we don't know if it was Jalal necessarily, but it
Right.
would make sense.
But as far as if we're going to go with the comic book, they've
Yeah,
been
that's fair.
there
Yep.
since
Yep.
for quite a while.
Mhm.
And depending on how long it's been since that time, not necessarily the faction wars themselves, but the time of the comic book to now, when Osiris was first exiled.
Right. And I mean, and
That's-
tapping into what we know about the Vanguard, so we know that the Vanguard was formed within Growing, I think is the one. Hang on real quick. Because that's where the schism really takes off between Osiris. Because I agree with Osiris's call out on this one. He's like, that's a really slippery slope. Because this is where the speaker kind of puts his foot down and says, hang on real quick, let me get to it. Every side has a voice, but not all voices should be given the same weight.
Right.
Some of these ideas are dangerous. We should determine which factions can continue to exist and give them an official channel through which to air their grievances and pursue their needs. And Osiris's immediate reaction is,
Yeah.
which ideas are dangerous? And who decides that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, yes. That is, you start talking about censoring things, and this is a dangerous point. What is it, Echelon South? I also love the call out to the binary star, Tallulah. Binary star idiots. Trinary, binary, whatever.
Yeah.
I totally take that as the writing team being like, eh.
Yeah.
But I do kind of see that as being and then again, this was where last week I was talking about, even though Osiris disagrees vehemently with it, he participates. He says no, he votes no, and he
Right. And he was the only one.
he goes along with it though. They vote, and Osiris is the only one who dissents, and then the consensus is formed, and it's like, okay, but the time that this happens to the time that we see in the comics, there is, I will put that there has been at least several decades, if not maybe a century or two, between those 2 points.
Right.
So that tells me that even though Osiris disagrees with it, the majority ruled, and he went along with that decision because that is That was the decision that the consensus made. He doesn't necessarily think it's the best decision, but, there is that.
He knew his was better.
Yeah. He disagreed with it, but...
Okay, two questions from Nerfling. Do we know how many Now you got me saying it again. Nerfling. Do we know how many speakers... Don't do that. Do we know how many speakers there have been? Are they guardians? So we do not know the grand total of speakers, but in the book,
I'm going
there's
to
at
count the
least
entries.
4.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but they
4 or
can't count
5.
the entries because the last
Well, no,
4
sorry.
or 5 entries are all
but,
one speaker.
Basically, I think the total is like 4. I think because there's one in
Within
Dreaming,
the
And then
book.
mentions of others.
yeah,
Because there's
that's
the
true.
speaker. Scroll. I actually kind of decided to name them a little bit.
Look at you.
Speaker who first speaker to dream.
Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Speaker who witnessed the end of the world.
Mhm. The Alpha and the Omega.
First speaker to see a ghost. First speaker to be taken prisoner. First speaker to never dream.
Mm-hmm.
Last speaker. So there's 6
Okay.
in Constellations.
Okay.
6 points of view, and then Ted's right because I think singing.
They mention other ones.
Singing, I think they mention other. Yeah, singing or longing. One of them mentions other
Right.
speakers, and then also building. He calls out that he hasn't heard from other ones. I believe is the other thing.
Right. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
there
there
hasn't been a
seems
new
to be
one.
some. Now I have the Postal Express if speakers.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
So, are any of them guardians? At the point of Constellations, it doesn't seem to be the case. The
It has not
speakers are
called them out.
described as... Yeah. The speakers do have ghosts that tend to follow them,
Mm-hmm.
but they do not get called out as risen or guardians in general. Because remember, the speaker who first see a ghost resurrect somebody, that was obviously a human at this time because we didn't even have an awoken back on Earth. So these were either human or possibly exo.
Mm-hmm.
There's no call out for that either.
That's true.
But
They would not be. Well, they could be awoken.
could they though? Because the
No.
awoken didn't
No.
come back to Earth until
I mean,
later.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, to be
But
clear,
we know that they could
could
from
be.
not Earth.
Yeah, they could be. They probably. It's improbable.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
the Awoken were very rare for the large part of the Dark Ages.
Right. I would imagine post collapse that there would have been a wider spread of people
Yes,
who could
yes,
potentially
totally.
be speakers from different planets.
Oh.
But once the collapse happened, that
Right.
it kind of limited it down to just Earth.
What happens
the-
if they took a human speaker and made it into an exo?
That
I
would
don't
be
know how to think
very
about that.
interesting.
Oh, that
we
would be
do
fun.
have the instance of a speaker being from another
It could
planet
still
because the
happen.
very first card,
Yes.
the first speaker, the first dreamer,
Mm-hmm.
is likely from or has been on Mars for a very long time
Right.
because they talk about
Freehold.
going to the top of Freehold.
Mhm.
and
Which
that-
also
and-
makes sense because Bray would be involved with this nonsense.
Right.
Do we want to
and
get
that
into
was kind
that
of in their
kind of
dream
theories?
state thing, right?
Yeah, that's why well, there you have the psychobabble, the interplanetary relocation maladjustment
Yep.
psychosis.
I love it. The clinicians at Braywell call it interplanetary relocation maladjustment psychosis.
It sounds like something Asher would say offhand,
Which
doesn't it?
the very next thing is a psychobabble catch-all for mental disturbances they can't explain.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So we get
cracks
a
me up.
mention in that card too, and I'm gonna that we talked about the 9, that mention of the 9 impulses.
Yes.
It's from the very first
Yeah.
card.
Yeah.
It's just either you or I put it in the notes. I think you did.
Oh,
we have-
Chat has a good point too
What's that?
about
Mara.
Mara being possibly a speaker. That's an interesting
that
theory.
would be-
That would be an
yeah.
interesting theory because he said I wouldn't be surprised if Mara was one of them, explaining her premonition, her hunch to flee with her family due to a speaker dream. That's an interesting take. I definitely
Yeah.
could. I can
Oh
see
my
that being.
God. There would be so many
That'd be
weird
fun to
implications with that.
Yeah.
And so much drama because
Wait,
Mara.
the
Yeah.
Awoken
I know.
and drama.
Shock
like,
face.
if-
You don't see it,
Oh.
but I have my shocked face on.
The question would be, do you think that the ghost would recognize that? That ghost would recognize that in her? Because Mara's been around ghosts. She's been around our ghost. Now, she hasn't been around a ton of them.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know how much it would. I don't know how much that theory would hold water, but
Just
yeah,
based
see,
on
like
what's
I love
happened so
I love
far.
how like both Dinos like will all Reefborn or Woken have prophetic dreams. That's that Tetsuan and all that. And
right, there's
but
so many that have prophetic dreams at
but
this point, though.
but remember how the Awoken were created.
Right.
In the distributary, they were all derived from Mara.
Mm-hmm.
And if Mara was
that would make sense.
technically, if Mara was a speaker, it would be a loop, basically. Yeah, and I mean,
God.
I like that theory. I mean, that is
I do too.
I don't know if I'd have to sit down and percolate it a little bit before I wade in fully, but I totally would. I could see that totally being a really interesting twist or direction.
I think Mara would be aware of it, and chat saying that she wouldn't necessarily be aware of it. I think with as much as she lived, she would totally know what's going on. I just don't think she would really care to get involved.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the interpretations of the dreams, too. And
Right,
you have
yeah.
to remember, though, that the Awoken are not the only ones in the universe who have
No,
had
they are the
prophetic
only ones.
dreams.
They're the only ones.
Do you really want to get into this fight right now? Do you see the
There's
the
something
face,
being
the
there's
audio
something
that's
being
coming?
thrown in the eastward direction from Colorado right now. What's that whistling
In
sound?
the mail, a
Thunk.
glitter bomb or something.
Throwing knife from 700 plus miles
Green said
away.
something about she's mailing me a basket of kittens. I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, something like that. Okay, so, as a good segue, last question from Gravemind. Would Ikora's visions pertaining to our Forsaken subclasses possibly hint at her being the next speaker? Ready, go.
No.
I don't.
What about our own visions?
No.
Are you just saying that to be obstinate?
Maybe. Well, so the thing, yes and no.
Anything's possible.
I mean, yeah.
At this point, right?
Yeah, I'm like,
It's not
I'm like, hey.
It's not like it's set in stone. I wouldn't discount it.
Well,
but
and the only
I
reason I would disagree with it is because Ikora was literally in close proximity to the speaker for a long time,
Right.
and we know that the speaker has for at least a couple decades prior to our arriving been looking for a replacement. So
Right.
Right.
there's that. The feeling that I get from Constellations is that the ability to be a speaker is extremely rare, even in the best circumstances.
Right.
And so, I'm not saying that because it seems like there are those who can dream, but there's also guardians that we see that have the ability that ghosts flock to. We have a guardian in our notes, we have a guardian that is referred to as the dead mother of ghosts, Micah 10. And, her entire thing is she goes around with flocks of ghosts and helps them find their links.
They're risen.
Yeah. And so, if you're talking about, because that was the first thing that that was the first note I wrote down when I read that entry. I was like, oh, ghosts flock to potential speakers. What about Micah? That is it's just one of the things that was a very prominent aspect of her her character. But again, I think it's also the confluence of all of those abilities that make it for a speaker. So if Ikora, we don't have any instances of Ikora interacting favorably with random ghosts. Like, it's not that she's antithetical to the ghost, but they don't like flock to there. And I think that's where you kind of don't see Saint necessarily falling into that realm either. Even though Saint is able, you see Saint being able to get other ghosts to help him do stuff, but they don't there's not this inexplicable clustering around them.
Right.
Go for it.
But here, so we're still kind of dodging the elephant in the room. Our guardian.
I don't think our guardian is. I don't think it's
the vision that I don't know the vision.
I would argue that
I don't think we can be a speaker per se,
right.
But we did have a speaker-like vision.
Yes.
With the vision at the end of the Red War.
Okay, let me clarify.
Say that
oh yeah.
We always have to keep in mind, just as a gameplay perspective, not just straight lore, it would be really convenient for gameplay if we could just cut out the middleman and then we were talking directly to the traveler or somebody that we know and have had established a connection with could talk directly to the traveler. Eventually that's gonna have to happen, one or the other. So yeah. I could see it just as in, for the sake of moving things forward in the game, that we could potentially be the next speaker, at least in name, even if we only get these visions because we are the guardian. We are, the one who helped bring it back to its current state.
I totally agree. To clarify, I totally agree that we are getting visions from the Traveler. But again, I think that that's only one qualifier. I don't think...
Right. That's one of the things that I'm pretty sure it was Dino. He and I were discussing in the intro session during, via chat, is that the reason that speakers have so far been non-risen may be the fact that their connection to the Traveler has been
stronger
in some ways, but now with the Traveler being weakened, the closest connection to the Traveler is us through our ghost, through our connection through the Traveler as guardians. So
in that perspective,
and we have a strong one.
Yeah, that perspective, the speakers could have been the beta testing for Guardians.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Thought. Yeah.
I mean, because when you say that to me that makes perfect sense. It's bleepity bleep, I'm getting attacked. I know I can do this, bleh, and let's pour all the energy into doing a army of these guys. Right. I totally can see that logic being present. Of course, that's assuming that ghosts.
We have a ghost.
Yeah, that's assuming that. That's assuming that the ghosts were created by the Traveler, which is still a assumption because we don't have flat out confirmation that the ghost actually came from it.
And this book does not help.
Yeah,
where it happened.
Speaking about that, let's go to what was it? Waking. Waking kind of muddies the water even further on that particular thing. It says, "I am the first speaker to see a ghost. The way we tell it after the collapse," and I will reiterate, the way we tell it. So, legends. After the collapse, the Traveler cut itself into 1,000 tiny pieces and sent them out into the world. These tiny pieces are drawn to me and to others like me, like moths. The first time I saw them, I thought they were surveillance drones, but up close they were nothing like our old technology. Not really. Ugh. The way they move seem organic and natural. I know. I'm like, if you just hadn't put the not really part.
Yeah.
They spin their shells like they are ruffling feathers. Their little forward-facing lights blink like eyes. I love this entry. Like, I just love it.
It's very good imagery.
Oh my gosh, the ghost that he's talking to is just so. We're called Ghost.
Because we're searching, I think. Yeah, this one also just makes my head hurt because all I see screaming across the page, even though it's not up there, is Dido. Dido.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I know.
Do you remember that theory?
Oh God, I know. No, I mean, and it's still a somewhat valid one. That's the thing is like, and I get like Dino's talking in chat about the context clues. Yes, we have context clues, but to be 100% clear, those are context clues. And when you're dealing with lore in the form that Destiny takes the lore, I mean, even when it's blatantly called out, sometimes you can't trust it. So context clues is implications. I mean, just...
Context clues are implications based off of a preconceived notion towards something.
Yes. So I'm just saying, right now, it does seem like a strong understanding that ghosts are from the Traveler. However, it is not confirmed.
Right.
So
I mean, that's at the whims of Bungie. And
don't get panties in a knot if next season we get, oh hey, Bray created the ghost. Like, you know, that is as applicable as the knife that cut the Traveler was, you know, the silver blood that's fled. Because I mean, in the same thing that, you know, I think, hang on real quick, let me look up.
You want to talk about muddying the waters? Remember this theory about Rasputin downing the Traveler? Yep. The fact that they call it a blade. What's the name of Rasputin's attack?
Aurora Knives is one of his attacks.
So, yeah, I mean, that's... Talk about being able to muddy the waters if you want to take it that direction. You can.
You can, but it flies in the face of the actual code that we know, that we have from Rasputin.
So far, yeah. But, like...
I mean, I agree.
Again, being able to take something out of context slightly, just because you have an idea of where it's going. There's so much in this book in particular that really gives you some insight into what's not only going on, but what happened.
Right.
Let's see here. Can we talk about building? This card in particular, the dreams in this one.
Sure.
The intro is something that's kind of been bothering me, and I'd like to
go for it.
To dive into it.
I really like this intro, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to read this one just fully for the beginning of this card, and it starts with like the Traveler's perspective. You are the last remaining star. In your dreams you see yourself suspended in bright but flickering light, staring out over a world half destroyed. You see thousands of pieces of yourself in that world, stumbling through it like infants, wandering in the labyrinthine ruins they don't understand. For a moment you feel in your body everything that they feel, the elation of success, the pain of failure, the candle snuff of death, the gasping of rebirth. You feel it all at once. So is this a description
So this goes into what I think Ted would mentioned about, or what you guys had been talking about, the speakers being an iteration of Guardians, right? So you see thousands of pieces of yourself in that world, stumbling through it like infants, wandering in ruins they don't understand. That's the Risen. Like that's you're it's so if we there's going to be a lot of ifs in this next statement, and I apologize. If we take the intros to these cards as being the perspective of the Alpha Lupi or the Traveler, then we can see the connection where it is associated with the Guardians, which does back into the D1 understanding that the Guardians are wielders of the Traveler's light. And there's a specific call out there that separates the Traveler's light from their own light, because we know that every living being in the Destiny universe has a spark of light. this thing that separates the Guardians from the normal people is that they are wielders of the Traveler's Light. Therefore, their reserve is significantly larger, which is where their paracausal capabilities stem from. So, to me, it makes perfect sense that the Traveler, as the source of their power, is able to sense it. It's similar to having an army of avatars, basically.
Right.
Where this then backs into the conversation that the speaker had with Osiris, in that, you know, we are basically glorified weapons of the Traveler. The conclusion, though, of this is the question, what does that mean for our will? Because if it is able to do this, what happens if it gets more power and it's like, you know what? I want an army. It already has that.
Right. A lot of this intro part, have you ever seen those videos of like the self-learning AI?
Yes. Yeah.
And how they go through generations and generations before they can do simple things like stand up or walk. I feel like the Risen are very much in that sort of phase.
Oh, no.
From the Traveler's point of view.
Yeah, no. I just had a connection when you said that.
Yeah, so, like, we're stumbling through it like infants. Like, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what the Traveler wants of us. But throughout those iterations, we've learned little bits more and more as the decades have moved on, and how as the speakers have moved on. And I think that eventually we will get it. And there will be that point, and like you said, if the Traveler wants an army, we're at a point where I think it's going to be able to communicate something like that to us rather easily now than it would have prior to D2.
Yeah. I think the reason I was groaning was you said the connection of like learning, and all I can think of is, oh gosh, what if all the Risen share a hive mind?
Right.
And
live, die, repeat type of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, oh no.
Well,
there's no way though.
That would be an interesting way to explain
there is a way.
Individual guardians.
There is a way to do it.
But can you question? So can you have a hive mind yet still have some major personality differences, including Risen
because
that are
here's the thing: is when I say hive mind, I don't mean that you're sharing the hive mind. You're backed up. Every time you get reset,
right.
You're drawing from the Traveler. Your light is being returned to the, like, you know.
Is it
so
Deep
you're
Stone Crypt style, but for Guardians?
Yes, exactly. Deep Stone Crypt style, but on a light basis instead of a technological basis. Like, you are teaching the Traveler what it means to exist. So actually, Green, when you mentioned the blobbity blob from the Cocytus Gate, similar concept, but it's the Traveler, not the Nine. Which actually makes me even more... Oh, God. Now my brain's going down that spin hole. I mean, it makes sense in my head. Like, I can totally see that. And the thing that would be... the thing that would make it even more of a chef's, kiss is the fact that the Guardians have no idea.
Exactly. Well, it kind of explains away why we can have... out of the game, us as the audience experience the same things with, at the same time, doing things like raids together and having that expand more than just our single Guardian to be an inclusion of other Guardians. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
He does. Should we start? I'm trying to think of some of the other things that I saw that we should bring up. Do we want to talk about Aphrodite going out? We haven't brought that up too much. We did bring up the fact that she left and she and the speaker had conversations. And
I had a
connection.
question. Oh yeah, you go.
Okay.
For it. Sorry. Yes. No.
I was
Aphrodite.
just going to ask. Everdeen talks about possibly going out and finding the next speaker, or keeping our eyes out for this next speaker for our, like, what do we think of that? Do you think she's actively looking for someone?
I think
she
is.
Was.
Yeah, she was, because I mean, she's back now. I mean,
Kind
that
of
could be an
still.
explanation of why she isn't constantly. Well, she's not back now. She was back, but she's not now. I mean, she is present again, I guess would be the best way of saying it. But that
She's
would be a
around.
good explanation, to why she's not around, is she could be still. Because, I mean, she came back in Rise of Iron as a courtesy, but she made it clear even then that she was not.
She wasn't staying, and she was going to
Yeah.
go back
She's
to
not
the colony.
Yeah, she was going to go back to the colony there, but and I mean, I'm really hopeful we get to see more of that, because I think that's a really cool. It's again just a story hook that I really hope they reel in sometime, because it seems like Everdeen actually has found an alternative to being a war character.
Yep. What was your question, Blue?
So I actually threw a couple on the mind map. Like I had one of like, what would have happened if the speaker had voiced the fear that he noted in the entry suffering?
Yeah.
So basically, like we kind of talked
That would've
about
been
like
helpful.
this.
Coming on in the Red War.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
hey guys, there's something coming. Like, if like, and I say that tongue in cheek, because it does completely eliminate the political ramifications of stuff, and I think the entry, in all fairness, I think this is Christine Faraday wrote this book. Amazing job in capturing the tension of why the speaker didn't do that. Like,
Right.
because he hang on, where is it? Second paragraph is, it shouldn't be a surprise. The truth has been passed down from speaker to speaker for generations. The traveler is good, the traveler is sentient, the traveler will save us, and the traveler will leave us. For many, many years, I believe that the prophecy of the traveler's departure was misinterpreted and fulfilled instead by its silence after the collapse, which, just a break, I actually really like that explanation.
Right.
And then he goes on to say, I stopped preaching that final tenet. It's only served to frighten people. And I mean, again, good intentions. And I love that, and this goes back to that call out that he is more of an interpreter than a speaker, because he's
Right.
and that's the curse of dreams. Like, the dream communication is like everything's symbolic. So he's like,
Right.
I interpret it as the traveler leaving us. We're having this conversation right now. Like, this is how we interpret the information being provided to us. It's like he's not wrong. He ultimately was maybe wrong, but he wasn't wrong. But the decision then, he also saw that final tenet was only frightening people, and I love that was at the core the reason why he stopped preaching that particular tenet. I mean, again, I know everyone loves bagging on the speaker. Like, I know everyone just loves dogpiling on him. That's why I love this book. And I can't say it enough, because it humanizes the speaker in such an amazing way.
Right.
And it shows that, okay, and like I said last week, I don't necessarily agree with the decisions that the speaker makes on a leadership. I have a huge issue with censorship. I don't think that it's ever okay. But that being said, I can totally understand from a logical standpoint that what he was trying to do.
Right. Like, without, if he would have kept that fourth tenet, or if he would have decided that, let's let everybody in, the city would be a drastically different place.
Well, and I think the other thing is, like, the whole thing with the Fallen, right? This speaker has a huge bone to pick with Fallen.
Yeah.
Whereas the speaker in I just blanked on the entry. The speaker in the entry with the dregs.
Longing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of get the sense that like that could have been the speaker that encouraged people to try for peace talks. You know, to try again. Like I think they call out that there had been peace talks a little bit, but like I can see after that event, you know, that speaker being like, oh, hey, they're not all baby eaters.
Exactly.
There's some people, or there's some of them that actually, you know, don't want to be at war.
Right.
Right.
And that, I think this is a beautiful example of the fact that so much of Destiny is written from the perspectives of the various people in their lives, not just the perspective of the omni meta writer.
Right.
And
it's perspectives of the different characters.
And this book is a microcosm of that, and I cannot say that loud enough.
Yeah.
Like,
it really is.
You have, what was it, six different people's perspectives on the same general theme, and every one of them has a very distinct flavor. Like, I don't know how to explain that, but that is really hard to do. Like, I really appreciate the underlying tone of the Traveler's communication is always pretty consistent. But the surface communication from the speaker's perspective is different. Like there is an inference that is significantly different from the very first to the very last.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, like, I think that this book does a really good job as a snippet into seeing the whole scope of Destiny lore. Like it does, I think, a really good job of that as well. Dead Orbit would run with the fourth tenant.
Dead Orbit would run.
Dead Orbit would run.
I think they mentioned that at some point.
You could just cut that sentence in half. Like that's.
Yeah, in Suffering they mentioned that if the system, maybe the
system that's
Dead
right.
Orbit has a say in it. Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, that would have been crazy if Speaker had been like, oh yeah, and the Traveler's gonna leave. Oh well, guess what?
Dead Orb's like, I told you so. Get out.
Yep.
Oh man.
You know, the thing that's really interesting about those four tenets is that they show up with the very first speaker.
Yep.
With the very first vision.
Well, okay,
so essentially, that comes from it.
I think that I actually like that because it's like it's a Childhood's End. It reminds me a lot of Childhood's End. It's not Orson Scott Card. It's Arthur C. Clarke. Book, great book, amazing book, but it's kind of the similar concept. An advanced species makes contact with humans, and they're like, "We're going to teach you how to do stuff." That's the kind of vibe that I got here. Was like the Traveler shows up and it's like, "Hey, this is the knowledge I can offer. You know, I'm sentient, I'm all that." But at the end, look, I will teach you how to fish.
Then I'm out.
But then I'm going. Like I'm gone.
Yep.
Like, I think that it's, in a way I read it, the way I read it
There's
was...
other people who need to fish.
Well, there's that, and it's also just the Traveler being like, I'm not going to just be your crutch. Like, it's just the Traveler being completely honest. Like, I will be bouncing eventually. Also, it could be a callback to what happened with the Whirlwind, and the Travelers being like, hey, something's chasing me, and I'm going to try to make sure that you're able to defend yourself, but... you might get eaten. Sorry.
Yeah, that fight or flight kind of sense, and that choice was taken away this time.
But,
Can I just read through? I want to do one final thing. I know we're getting close.
No,
to time.
yeah. I was just about to ask if there was anything you wanted to.
Yep. Dreaming. I want to read through the Traveler's lines. "Quote unquote" lines through the surface stuff.
If I call out on that, I put that on the map as well. So we have that there.
Yeah, so if you want to kind of follow along on the map at the Lore Network,
It'll be with the show
be able to
notes,
see that.
and you should be able. Full disclosure, I am going to try to embed it into the website, so you should be able to get it directly from the website. If you aren't, you can click on the link, and it will take you to MindMeister.
So the lines I'm talking about specifically is during there's a bit of a speech type thing that happens on here. It's like the rise of the first speaker is essentially what's happening throughout here, and interlaced within his description or their description. Again, there's no pronouns assigned necessarily. There are these lines from the traveler itself, and it says, "I am drawn to bright and attentive star. I speak to it through movement, through feeling. It understands implicitly. I glide through space as if through water, tugged in 9 directions by 9 impulses. There is whispering from the deep, dark, alluring and terrifying, a reminder of things left behind, bittersweet and abhorrent." There's some interesting things to unpack in there.
No, there's not.
Why, okay, so first question, I'm drawn to a bright and attentive star.
Mm-hmm.
Is that meaning the speaker? Is that meaning
given the
star soul?
I can see that.
Bright and attentive star. I see that as like
I can
a
see that.
life-bearing sun.
I see it as more so
with the terraforming component, especially.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm seeing it more so as like a reference, like if we're continuing the line of thought as the points of stars, thousands of stars, I'm seeing it more as the speaker.
No, because if it's the star system, I just had a thought that could be why that's why it's leaving, is it's bouncing from attentive star to attentive, literally the attentive stars, the life-bearing star systems.
Right.
It's jumping from solar system to solar system based on whether or not it's, the Goldilocks zone or whatever. Like, oh my gosh, that could be...
I don't think that's actually it. I still think it's through the speaker.
I mean, no.
That's a chicken and egg scenario. I guess we don't know
I could
if the
see that.
happened
The only
prior
reason...
to the traveler.
Right. The only reason I'm thinking it could be the solar systems is going back in line with the theory of the music of the spheres. Because the music of the spheres is based around the harmonics that is created through the synchronous movement of the actual spheres. So if you speak to it through movement...
this book.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but if you start speaking through it through movement, through feeling, and you also understand like Gaia forms, which is also called out in Destiny... Like the star is it's not necessarily quote unquote sentient, but it would be a component that would understand implicitly through the music of the spheres. I can also see this as being speaker, and I might be overthinking that. I'm not going to comment that I do that often, but
yes.
I can see it being both cases. And if it is a solar system, that makes it even more interesting, because it says, when it says the traveler will leave you, it's not anything nefarious. It's literally it's picking up another solar system that's like, oh hey, there's a boop boop boop, and it jumps to that solar system.
Like a solar system that can have life, and then it's like, hey, that guy can understand me. I might stick around here for a little bit,
right?
But eventually, I'm going to need to go to that other solar system,
right?
To see if anybody
and
there
the reason
can understand me.
And the reason that is because back in the Eris, I blanked not Revelations when the Eris 1 team, when we got to know them.
The fire team?
No, not the fire team. The original the Jacob Hardy entries.
Yeah.
But basically, so when it was just Moon X, we had it called out that it kept bouncing in and out of existence. Like it kept teleporting places and no one knew where it was going. That could be what's happening, is it's like it's finding different systems, I mean, this is all based on an if possibility, though. So
a very if possibility.
I do also see it being also the case being the speaker, given the other context of star usage later in
within the book.
Within the book, yes.
So here's the next line. I glide through space as through water, tugged in 9 directions by 9 impulses.
Conspiracy theory time.
Yeah.
Yep, I know, you're going there. Are you going there in so much as the continuing the music of the spheres as the impulses that is dragging it through the system?
I mean, yeah,
Or
you could do
pulling it
that.
in
You could do it
different
that way. You
directions?
could do it. I was going to go also with hashtag the 9 are everywhere.
Right.
Oh my god, it's like Savathun.
Well, I mean, then the reason why I would say that I could see, first off, it is not capitalized. I think that's important to call out. As with most Destiny things, capitalization is a very important thing. But I could see that because later we get a call out to darkness, not dark darkness, but just like
deep dark.
but like blackness, like dark energy. Cough, cough, callous, cough, cough, the 9 looking at stuff, which is what I think is Lavina was noticing. Trigger. The 9 are everywhere and Savathun is everyone.
This whole time, it was actually me.
Oh, no. So, I mean, like, I could see that. But, I mean, also, if you're going to go with, like, the Aeon cult and Gaia energies kind of concept, you could also see that in 9 directions. You have 9 gravitational pulls. Confirmation Pluto's a planet.
Also, your dark line. There is whispering from deep dark, alluring and terrifying, a reminder of things left behind, bittersweet and abhorrent. So there is still conversations with something left behind, things left behind, bittersweet and abhorrent. So wherever the traveler is a lightning rod for other things, right? That's kind of something we've discussed on and off throughout Destiny in general, is that when the light gets bright, the dark gets darker.
Yep.
So
yeah, and Black
it knows
Flag,
it's
one
still
more
being chased.
thing about the star symbology or symbolism. Symbology. Anyways, sorry. Boondock Saints. Anyway, the Black Flag points out too that it could be searching. One of the reasons it could be interesting as a system is that it's the traveler searching for new civilizations to imbue with a light to prove its point to the darkness, which is a callback to Unveiling and the Flower Game. So, but before I completely derail us for another 30 minutes, I think I've expressed my thoughts on the book pretty vehemently and repeatedly. Do you guys what were your guys' kind of overall
Final
impression
thoughts?
of the books?
Ted, do you want to go first?
Sure. I loved them. Like you said, it's a nice cross-section slice of Destiny, and something that's really easy to read and digestible, and definitely the more you read it, the more you're going to find those little things that I imagine we could talk for another 2 or 3 hours about those little things just coming across them.
Correct.
But definitely a staple read for anybody who's interested in getting a nice cross section of Destiny and its lore.
Awesome. Final thoughts from me. This book has a good way to describe this book is it's the fringe at the end of the threads that are starting to come loose. So you're starting to see some of the pieces fall more and more into place, which is great. And this one has a lot of little things that are hidden in here that you may not catch the first time you read it. So reading through a few different times, grabbing the different perspectives, seeing the different speakers. The initial read of this book is it's not super emotional, except for like maybe the collapse scene. It's a very straightforward book, but there's so much hidden in here that once you put yourself in the position of the various speakers, you gain a more the empathy side of things, and you gain a lot more perspective of how they were handling themselves and going through their lives, but also seeing the traveler in the perspective of the traveler, which is something we have never had before.
Right.
Save through Alpha Lupi, which is still a very vague representation. So I think this book is probably one of my favorites so far that we've gone over in 2020.
I would yes. Given that it has been 4 weeks, I would agree.
Yeah. This is why I said in 2020.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I the thing here too is, like, I love that. I mean, I just, my hat's off to the writing team for this book, because again, I think that the breadth and the scope of just the writing tonal qualities and the shifts in that tonal quality is just amazing to me. I think it was really well done. So that's actually kind of a good segue into shout outs for the advanced session. I'm going to just kind of steal the lead of that one.
Go for it.
A huge shout out to, I think it's Christine Faraday is the primary writer for this particular book. My hat's off to you. Like, seriously, this is a really well done book, and my hat's off to the rest of the writing team because I know it's a group project. I know that, like, it is a group that does this. You can't do this without a village, and this is definitely true. But seriously, you guys, this is a good one. I really enjoyed reading this, and it's mostly because I really enjoyed the unashamed and unapologetic take on explaining a character that the community, for the most part, has really disliked and has been very vehement about. This is a bad person. It's like, no, okay, look, this is, like, you can agree or disagree with how the speaker chooses to lead. That's one thing. But this does a really good job in explaining why those choices were made and the history that led to that character making those, and that, I think, is always something valuable when you're talking about character development. You want character development, read this book. Just read this book, because this explains the development of that character.
Absolutely. Ted, do you have any shout outs for this one?
Shout out to chat for staying with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Blue said, this was an amazing thing that the Bungie writing team have pulled off, and it could not have been a relatively easy thing. And compared to other lore entries where by the time we get to the end, there's still a lot of openness and speculation. This is one of the entries where it does kind of taper off to an end point. I'm not saying that there's not anything that could happen afterwards. We don't know, but at least we'll experience it. And I think that's just a testament to how well done and well thought out this has all been. And yeah, just to go with Blue, the writers.
Absolutely. So speaking of writers, I actually want to do a shout out to one of the new narrative leads.
Oh, I forgot. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. She tweeted out the other day, I packed so much Destiny 2 lore into my brain these first 3 months at Bungie that it started dribbling out my nose.
Confirmation,
really
there's a story Bible.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Which, I mean,
if not, could you imagine being a writer and not have a story Bible?
To be fair, my
hard.
respect would kind of go up for them, because how the hell would you keep it all straight without that?
Kidding.
We hardly keep it straight, and we're doing this weekly. I mean, I know they're doing it daily, but geez. At this point, how massive the world is, you really have to kind of focus on different segments, and I know that's one of the both the frustrations and the beauty of the game is the fact that we get these writers writing different stories, and some of these different stories get kind of not necessarily put on the sideline, but you have a new writer who comes in who wants to take on a different aspect or a different story that they're excited about, which is great because it fleshes out this world even further, giving us way more width of story, not necessarily depth of story. And it seems at this point, if they continue on the track that they've starting in Shadowkeep, they're going to start diving deeper and connecting these stories. So you don't have just the width of stories now that we've gotten from all these different writers, but you're going to get a lot more depth in connecting them together. So I'm excited to see what Julia does. She's definitely... I enjoy it when there's a female narrative lead. I'm not going to hide my bias on that one. Like, I love... Guy did an amazing job with the season. I think that
Jonathan did a really good job with
John did a great job with the season. John Goff has done a great job with the season that he's been helping with. So I'm excited to see it go. And I don't know if a different direction is accurate, because it may not be that much different. But having a new set of eyes and perspective on the lead aspect of it is always really fascinating from a study perspective for us. So I'm excited to see her work. And excited to see what happens next. And what's going to happen to Saint 14 and all the different things. So there's a lot of fun things in the horizon, I hope. I'm excited to see it. Anyway, Blue?
Well, I just, as has become traditional in the last 2 weeks, I want to thank you for your time. And until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.